In the quiet but growing town of Uromi, nestled in the southern part of Nigeria, the appearance of a new dazzling couple shook the very foundation of the community. When Abebi and Maxwell Adams arrived, no one had seen their kind before. They weren't just visitors, they were a storm in silk, clad in designer suits, glowing in foreign perfumes, and backed by armed security. They brought with them wealth, class, and unsettling mystery. At first, people of Uromi were wary. They stared from behind closed curtains, whispered behind market stalls, and wondered who the strangers were. But like water softens stone over time, money opened hearts. Soon, the Adams family was sponsoring local markets, handing out food, building shops for traders, helping farmers, and even funding community events. They became symbols of grace and generosity, pillars in the church, beloved in the media. Their charity foundation became a local landmark. And the jewel in their crown, St. Rahima's Academy, a sprawling boarding school built exclusively for orphaned girls. It was the crown jewel of their generosity, or so it seemed. But behind the security cameras, the smiling billboards, and the sprawling walls hidden far from the village roads, St. Rahima's Academy was no school at all. It was a factory of silence, a grooming center, a place where innocent girls were selected, drugged, violated, and imprisoned. It was a cartel cloaked in compassion, and Abebi was its queen. She wasn't just the public face, she was the recruiter, the strategist. Her hunting grounds were the streets, orphanages, and markets. She would approach orphans with charm, feeding them, clothing them, offering scholarships, and with no families to report them missing, the girls vanished unseen, unsearched for. Once inside St. Rahima's, they were trapped, guarded by high-tech surveillance, thick forest, and ex-military security. Most villagers had never even seen the school. Many doubted its existence. The community saw girls entering vans with bright smiles and bags full of new clothes. They envied them, but didn't know it was a one-way trip. And then there was a blessing. She had been inside for 4 years, a mother of 4. Not once had she seen the outside world. Not once had she held one of her babies. Each time she gave birth, the child was taken immediately, shipped off to foreign adoption markets, or sold to desperate wealthy couples under fake legal documents. She had stopped crying. Her soul had scarred over. She was the oldest girl in the academy, and she remembered everything. In 5 years, the Adams family's criminal network had grown exponentially. Politicians, business moguls, even law enforcement were in their pockets. Men from all over the country and beyond visited under the cover of donations and board meetings. In truth, they came to the school for pleasure and products. It was a dark enterprise built on the exploitation of the most vulnerable. But evil has an expiring date. One fateful afternoon, Abebi and Maxwell Adams left the estate in haste, headed for an emergency meeting in the state capital. The gates clanged shut, their fleet of black SUVs roaring down the red earth road of Uromi. Unbeknown to them, a door within their mansion, a door no one was ever allowed to open, was left ajar. Inside the massive home, Tommy, their curious teenage daughter, wandered through the hallway aimlessly. Phone in hand, she had passed the strange door many times in her life, always shut, always off limits, but today it was open. Her heart beat faster. This door has never been opened before, she murmured to herself. She walked past it, hesitated, then turned back. The silence pulled at her curiosity. She peered through the opening. No one was in sight. Holding her breath, she pushed the door gently and stepped in. The room was cold and pristine. A large oak shelf lined the far wall, filled with neatly stacked brown files, labeled and organized like an archive library. In the center stood a ground desk with an elegant chair, clearly Abebi's private study. On the desk were several folders, all bearing the same deep brown cover. A photograph of her mother and her father, framed in gold, sat ominously on the side. Tommy slowly sat down and pulled one file towards her. Inside was a file of a young girl, age 15, name, location, medical notes. The next file, another girl, age 14, then another. Each document was hauntingly consistent. Different faces, but the same details. All girls, all young, all enrolled in St. Raheema's Academy. Her pulse quickened. Wait, isn't that mom and dad's school? Our family's academy? I've never even visited it. Who are these girls? She flipped to the back of the file and froze. Attached to each girl's photo was an older man's photo. She blinked, her throat dry. Every single file had the same disturbing pairing, a minor girl and an elderly man. They were all linked to Raheema's Academy. Before she could process the horror, a car horn blared outside the compound. She jumped, fumbling to put back the files in order. The door creaked open behind her. Tommy, what are you doing here? It was her baby. Her voice was sharp, cold, unwavering. Tommy stammered, Mommy, I saw the documents. Who are these girls? Who are these men? Don't complete that sentence, her baby snapped. Her voice dropped to a whisper laced with venom. And don't you ever enter this room again, even if it's opened by mistake. Are we clear? Tommy's lips trembled. Yes, Mommy. As she left the room, her chest tight with fear and confusion, Maxwell Adams approached from the hallway. Was that Tommy? Did she just come out of here? He asked. Yes, Ababy replied tightly. The door was unlocked when we left. She wandered in. I've spoken to her. Maxwell's jaw clenched. I'll talk to her too. But right now, let's get what we came for and go. They moved to the locked cabinet in the corner, pulled out a marked black folder and left the room in silence. There is a silence that creeps before judgment. A pulse in the air so thick it wraps itself around the wicked like a noose. What the evil often forgets is this. No matter how well they plan, how deep they bury their secrets, the day of reckoning comes, slow but certain. And for the Adams family, that day began with Utom. Her name was Utom, and even at just 16, she was the light in the dusty lanes of Urumi's largest market. A beauty unmatched, her body matured far beyond her age, broad hips, a soft round face, and almond eyes that sparkled with kindness. Utom was adored, not just for her appearance, but for her spirit. She had no parents, she had no home. But what she had, she gave. A smile, an extra helping hand, a kind word. Every trader knew her. She was the girl who helped customers carry goods, who linked buyers to sellers and earned a tiny commission in return. She never begged, she never walked. She hustled, and she never stopped smiling. But behind that smile was pain. Utom lost her parents in a fire that gutted a row of tenants' rooms on the outskirts of town. Her father, a mechanic, and her mother, a Gari trader, had both been trapped inside when the flames swallowed the building. Utom was at school that day. It was supposed to be a regular Thursday. She never made it back to school again. Thrown into the streets, passed around by uncaring relatives, she chose to live on her own terms. The market became her family. The traders became her guardians. They watched her grow. They watched her resist the countless men who tried to lure her with fake promises. She said no every time. She was too proud to be bought, too focused on surviving. And that resistance made her shine even brighter. She became a symbol to other young girls, a role model, a quiet hero. And it was that light that caught her baby's eye. The first day her baby saw Utom, she was watching her from across the street, under designer sunglasses and a laced veil. Her baby was on one of her unusual surveillance rounds, scouting the markets for girls who matched her sinister checklist: beauty, poverty, and silence. Utom fit the mold perfectly. What Abebi didn't expect, however, was how quickly Utom would take to her. The woman with perfume that lingered and bags that sparkled spoke so sweetly. Utom, so trusting, so loving, welcomed her attention. They laughed. Abebi bought her slippers, a small bag, food, hair extension, phone. Everyone in the market saw this and began to envy Utom. Then one day, while sitting in her regular corner where she waited for customers, a soft hand touched her shoulder. Utom, the voice whispered. She turned. It was Abebi, standing like a vision in white. Would you love to go back to school? Utom froze. Her eyes instantly filled with tears. She hadn't heard that question in years. It had been her only dream to return to the classroom, and it was the same week she had lost her parents. It was the last hope she had shelved away in silence. She couldn't hold it in. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She nodded, trembling. Yes, ma. I want to go back to school. I want to go back to school. She said it with her whole heart. She didn't ask questions. She didn't think. She trusted. And that was the last day anyone in Uromi Market ever saw Utom. She became the opening door to the underground atrocity the Adams family unleashed on the community. It was supposed to be a night of grandeur. The Adams estate hosted a luxurious get-together for politicians, billionaires, and royalty. Black SUVs lined the streets for miles. Uniformed police were stationed on every corner of Uromi. Even the state governor was in attendance. Inside the house, however, two souls were restless. Tanya and Tomi, the two daughters of Maxwell and Abebi, were forbidden from attending the party. Not this one, their mother had said. It's not for children. But children don't listen. Tomi, the older sister, was popular online and had made new friends on Facebook. Friends who had invited her to a cooler, younger house party, happening just a few blocks away. Tanya, younger and more cautious, hesitated, but eventually she gave in. They slipped out through the side gates while the music echoed through the mansion. When they arrived, the house was dark lit, pulsing with music and youth. Boys greeted them warmly. Drinks were everywhere, loud laughter, expensive perfumes, but something felt off. One of the boys smiled at them. You don't take alcohol? No wahala. At least have some cake. The girls laughed. They were hungry. The cake was sweet. They didn't know it was laced with marijuana and stronger substances. That was the last thing they remembered. When they woke up, they weren't at home. They were in a large, unfamiliar room filled with dozens of girls dressed alike. Some were asleep, some were weeping, some stared blankly into space. Tanya and Tomi screamed. Back at the Adams estate, all hell had broken loose. How could the daughters of the most protected family vanish without a trace? Private investigators, armed guards, and national security agents were deployed. Every staff was interrogated. Every inch of Uromi was searched. Their photos flooded television, radio, and social media with a massive cash reward for information. But what the Adams family had failed to remember was this: no one escapes the system they built. And whatever the boys working for them on the streets touched under their employ never saw the light again. Whatsoever enters the school never sees the outside light again, at least not alive, even when it was their own daughters. A few hours after the chaos of arrival, Tomi noticed something, a name printed on the back of the uniforms every girl wore in the facility: St. Rahima's Academy. It tugged at her memory like a whisper. She had seen that name before somewhere, but where? She tapped her sister Tanya, drawing her attention to it. Tanya, Rahima's Academy. I've seen that name before in the house. Those documents, 2 months ago, in that room. Remember that day? But Tanya wasn't paying attention. Her mind was drowning in terror, obsessed with finding a way out. Tomi, now is not the time for that. We need to leave here. Whatever this place is, it's not a school. Tomi turned back, her brows furrowed in confusion and fear. The dots were slowly connecting in her head, but there was no time to think. A loud bell rang through the compound. A tall, muscular woman wearing a red scarf on her arm, walked into the room. The chatter stopped. Behind her, 4 heavily armed security men stood with batons and rifles. Then a voice rang from the center of the hall. It was Utom, now hardened and expressionless. "I know you are scared. I was scared once too," she said, standing on a raised step. "But the best way to survive here is to listen. Don't fight, don't argue, don't try to escape. If you follow the rules, you will leave." A hush fell across the crowd, but Tomi, her fear now boiling into anger, stood up and shouted, "What if we don't listen? What if we all fight them together? There are more of us than them." Gasped. All eyes turned to her. Utom paused, her face softened. Then she slowly turned around and without a word unzipped her top and pulled it down to reveal her back. A collective stream tore through the girls. Her back was a maze of scars, deep and jagged, some still fresh, some old and twisted. "This is what happens when you try to fight," Utom said quietly, "and that's only if they let you leave." The room fell into a terrifying silence. The rebellion died before it began. 3 weeks passed. The girls adapted, some with numbness, others with silent tears. And then one morning, a new demand came through. One of the Adams family's highest profile clients urgently needed a kidney transplant. A donor match had to be found. Normally, the rule was clear: do not operate on new girls. They needed to be used for a while before any invasive procedure. But the youngest group, including Tanya, had the only viable blood match. The doctor overseeing the facility called her baby directly. "Ma, the request is urgent. The blood match comes from one of the newly brought-in girls. Should we proceed?" Our baby was sitting in the guest lounge of her mansion, surrounded by foreign dignitaries and high-ranking politicians. She snapped. "Is this what I pay you for? Why are you this incompetent? Are you a fool? If you dial my number again after this, be ready to find yourself a new job, okay?" And without waiting for a reply, she ended the call. She didn't know she had just authorized the operation on her own youngest daughter, Tanya. The surgery was rushed. The equipment were outdated. Something critical wasn't stitched properly. Tanya began to bleed internally. For 2 days, she groaned on in the thin mattress in a corner of the compound, her breath shallow, her face pale, her cries fading. The house mother of the facility, an older woman who had seen it all, finally called her baby. "Madam, please, one of the girls is dying. The one who operated on. She's not stopping. She needs to be taken to a hospital now." Her baby cut her off. "Of all people, you should know the rules. No one leaves. Handle it." And she hung up. Tanya died 6 hours later. No funeral, no tears. Just another shallow grave behind the facility. And in the warehouse of broken girls, the world moved on. They were used to death by now. The rains came without warning. Heavy, pounding rain that soaked Urumi's red earth and drowned the streets in a restless murmur. Thunder cracked across the sky as if the heavens were delivering a verdict. And on that very night, inside the high walls of St. Raheem's Academy, Tomi stood over her sister, Tanya's shallow grave, fists clenched, tears pouring from her face. Her voice was raw with rage. "They killed her," she whispered to herself. "My own parents killed my sister." She didn't cry for help anymore. She was past tears. She was ready for war. That same night, Utom approached her silently. Her eyes no longer black, but blazing with a quiet storm. She dropped a rusted key into Tomi's palm. "What is this?" Tomi asked. "A beginning," Utom replied. "I used to dream of escape. Then I stopped. But when I saw your face, your fire, I started dreaming again." Tomi stared at her. "Will you help me?" "No," Utom said. "We will help each other." And so began the uprising. It started with whispers, then with maps, then with sabotage. The girls began to memorize guard shifts, camera blind spots, and supply routines. Utom had secretly smuggled pages of the facility's blueprints from a careless officer months ago. With Tommy's intelligence and the girl's courage, a plan was born. But justice was not waiting. It was coming. Unbeknown to the Adams family, an unlikely source had already begun leaking information. Blessing, the oldest girl in the facility, the mother whose 4 children had been taken from her, had reached her breaking point. She had memorized numbers, faces, voices, and she had written everything down. In the pocket of her mattress was hidden a phone, slipped to her by a young cleaner whose own sister had gone missing years ago. That phone had one job: send the truth. And that day it did. Photos, videos, audio, the files of every victim, names of clients, security maps, locations of graves. The cleaner's cousin worked with an NGO in Lagos, a silent coalition investigating missing girls in Edo State. Within hours, the files had traveled to the media, Interpol, and the presidency. But before authorities could act, the girls made their move. On the night of the Grand Adams Charity Gala, as dignitaries toasted champagne in the gold halls of the mansion, the facility, hundreds of miles away, erupted into chaos. Utom led the charge. Tommy disabled the generator system. Several guards, poisoned earlier through food laced by the kitchen girls, collapsed mid-duty. The facility's security was breached from within. The girls fought, not with weapons, but with the power of unity. They overpowered the weaklings, tore down surveillance, and ran through the dense forest, barefoot and bloodied, towards the road, toward freedom. As dawn broke, the National Intelligence Agency, anti-trafficking units, and foreign security forces stormed St. Raheem's Academy. What they found broke the nation's heart. Over 73 girls rescued, mass graves discovered, organ trafficking chambers dismantled, an international database of clients exposed. Maxwell and her baby Adams were arrested during their gala, dragged from the dance floor in full public view. Her baby tried to scream, "Do you know who I am? I built this town." A female officer snapped the cuffs on her, and you will rot in a prison below it. The scandal shook Nigeria and the world. Headlines screamed, "Charity Queen behind child trafficking empire." Orphanage of horror busted in Edo. Justice for the daughters of Uromi. But the most viral video came from Tommy, a tear-streaked message recorded from a safe house. "My name is Tommy. My parents ran a school that was a prison. They hurt my sister. They hurt many, but we survived. We fought back, and we will never be silent again." It was viewed 20 million times in just 3 days. St. Raheem's Academy was demolished. Maxwell and her baby were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, tried both locally and by international courts. Assets seized, foundations dissolved, clients hunted down across borders. But more importantly, the girls were not forgotten. A rehabilitation center was built on the ashes of the old facility, named Tanya's Light Heaven. Utom became its first director. Blessing was reunited with 2 of her children, rescued through global adoption tracking. Tommy became an activist, speaker, and author, telling the story to the world they needed to hear. And Uromi, once a silent town wrapped in secrets, stood tall again, not in shame, but in resilience. Because the wicked may build empires on pain, but the truth will always find a crack. And when it does, it burns everything down.